Once you've got your lion composited in the scene, you need to then balance that scene. In other words, you want to make that lion look like he belongs. So already we can see that there's a little tinge of the blue. That's because we've got some of the open areas in the hair here that are showing the diver environment, the blue water, sort of coming in through there. More than likely, if we were to look at the mask in this area, it would be semi-transparent. So just to let you see that, if we take a look at that area now, you can see it's allowing the blue to show through in these areas. So just get back to my layers. Now what else can we do here? One of the things you want to do is identify light sources. Where is the main source of light coming from? And often you get little hues. If you look at this diver here, very strongly lit top right. So we would expect the same of the lion in that environment. You'll also notice the blue tinge on the diver's skin. So we're going to have to do something in the way of colorizing the lion as well. But we've also got these other sources of light here coming from the lighting in the camera, and maybe they would light the lion up in that situation. We just want to make sure that the lion looks like it belongs in that environment. Call this a sea lion. So one of the first things I want to do is create, using a layer, create a new adjustment layer for a hue and saturation adjustment. So once I do that, you'll notice right off the top that it's going to do that for the entire composition. So if I start changing hue, just zoom out here a bit. If I start changing the hue, notice that it's doing it on the lion as well as the background. We just want it to affect the lion. And so what we need to do in that case is we need to hold the Option key down and just click in this intervening dividing line between the layer adjustment and the actual layer that we want it to take effect on. So just hold on Option, click, and you notice that it indents it. So you just see this little tab indicating that this adjustment is only going to affect this layer, the lion layer. So now if I start making my adjustments with hue, you'll notice that only the lion's changing. So I'm going to shift that down towards the blue end of the spectrum. And I'm thinking a little bit of mix of the lion's yellow with the blue of the water would kind of give him a bluey green tinge. Just like that. Now, I don't want to apply it completely over the entire line. I want it to be more intense in some areas and less intense in others. So here's what I can do. First of all, I make sure that the mask is selected. And you'll notice there is no mask. It's all filled in white right now, which means the entire saturation adjustment is being applied directly to the entire lion layer. However, if I go to Edit and I fill that mask in black, notice that it removes the color change. Now, if I go back in onto that mask, so you'll see, here it is, painted in black now. And if I now, with that mask selected, notice the edges there indicating that the focus is on the mask, not on the adjustment. And you'll notice that the Properties panel changes. And what I want to do now is paint using a brush. And I want to use a brush with a fairly soft edge. I'll use the right hand bracket to make it a bit larger. And in here, I can control the hardness. And I want to reduce the hardness to 0. So it's a very, very slight effect. Now what this means is, when I start painting, I'm painting in white. And what that will do is it will allow that effect to show through. And so now I can determine exactly where on that lion I want the coloration to take effect. And right now I'm doing it at 100%. There we go. And if I wanted to, I could paint the entire thing in at this point. Now, you can see the mask that I've created over there on the right-hand side. There it is, right there. And at any point, rather than painting in white, if I just go to my color and I can paint in 50%. So I can paint in gray. And in this case, I start painting in that mask. Another way of doing that, window, just look at the color palette. I could select for myself here just a grayscale slider and choose a grayscale value for myself. And now I'm painting at around 50%. And watch what happens here. Painting at 50% blends the color of the lion and the color adjustment at about a 50-50 ratio. So I want to show just a little bit of the natural coloring coming through, leaving it near the edges to be more intense. There we go. I'll just make my brush a little bit smaller. Paint down here. And what that's doing is it's giving a kind of green aura to the edge of the lion's back and to his haunches here as well. I just think it looks a little more realistic. So we're not just using a blanket color change throughout. Some areas it's a little more intense than others. There we are at 50%. And I'm good with that. So you can see then that we have that little aura of green around the outside. Now other things that we can do is using dodging and burning. That's right here. And there's the dodge tool and the burn tool. Now if our shadow's coming from, our light rather is coming from top right, then we could use the dodge tool. Let me just make it larger, right bracket, makes it larger. And because we're only working, in this case, I want to work right on the image itself, right there. And as we're doing it, I can create more light in that area. So I'm brightening up the lion in that region where light would be falling from above. Possibly in areas like this. And conversely, if I used the dodge tool, the burn tool, just make it a little bit bigger, right bracket. In areas where naturally there would be shadow because our light is coming from top right, I can use our burn tool there just to emphasize shadow detail. And by adjusting this value here, you can increase or decrease the intensity or the degree to which that shadowing is applied. And so here we're just making this very consistent. with the reality in which this lion finds himself. And note too that it's additive. Every time I do this, it's going to add in more shadow. I'll put some shadow on the bottom of the tail. Let's go back to our dodge tool. Just zoom in here. And we're just adding highlight to the top of the tail here. And so there you have it. Adding color, adding highlight and shadow with the dodge and burn tool helps us to create a scenario where our lion looks like he's actually underwater. Another thing that could be possible here would be applying a blur filter. So let's just take a look at a Gaussian blur filter here. And we could just blur that a tiny bit if need be. If the lion is just in too sharp a focus. But we'd assume that the lion is the subject matter, so perhaps a blur is not entirely what we need at this point. But know that you can do this to create depth of field. So there we have it. And I'm just going to export now. Well, first of all, I should save. You should always save your native files in a PSD, Photoshop format, just so you can go back and make edits later on. But for submitting, you're just going to export this, quick export as a PNG. And we'll put that out there. Lion, I'm just going to call this sea lion. There we go. And we'll save that PNG, and you can submit that for assessment. So that's it. That's how you put your line underwater, or in any other environment for that matter. Just make sure you understand the context and the lighting scenarios and the color casts that are natural to the scene that you're putting them in there. And then don't forget some of the tricks that we looked at here in terms of using adjustment layers and masking.